Visualize the sound of motorcycles, but it's not just a ride, it's a death sentence. Imagine rolling down a quiet Canadian highway at night. The air is fresh, the road is empty, and everything seems peaceful until you hear the deep thunder of motorcycles behind you. A pack of riders speeds past, their jackets marked with the infamous winged skull. You just saw the Hells Angels, Canada's most feared biker gang. But these guys aren't just a bunch of motorcycle lovers. They have a reputation for brutal violence, illegal businesses, and complete dominance over the criminal underworld. They've been at war with rival gangs, taking over entire cities, and even outlasting police crackdowns. So how did the Hells Angels become the most powerful biker gang in Canada? How did they dominate the streets, and what brutal things have they done to stay on top? Let's get into it. But before we begin, these types of videos do take a lot of effort to create, so please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel. The origin story. The Hells Angels weren't born in Canada. The gang started in 1948 in California, but it didn't take long for the outlaw biker culture to spread north. By 1977, the Hells Angels officially arrived in Canada, starting with a small chapter in Montreal. Back then, the biggest biker gang in Quebec was the Popeyes Motorcycle Club, a dangerous crew known for violence. The Hells Angels saw potential in them and made an offer they couldn't refuse. Join the club, wear the Hells Angels patch, and become part of something bigger. The Popeyes agreed, and just like that, the Hells Angels took over Montreal. The rise to power. Montreal was the perfect place for the Hells Angels to grow. The city was full of crime, and drug trafficking was a gold mine. The gang started making millions selling cocaine and other drugs, which put them in direct competition with another gang, the Rock Machine. And that's when things got bloody. The Quebec Biker War. The Quebec Biker War, 1994 to 2002, was one of the deadliest gang wars in Canadian history. The Hells Angels and Rock Machine went head-to-head in a brutal conflict over drug territory. Bombings, assassinations, and open shootouts became routine. One of the most shocking moments was in 1995 when an explosion killed an innocent 11-year-old boy named Daniel Desrochers. The public was outraged, and the police finally decided to take the war seriously. But even with police pressure, the killings didn't stop. The war left over 160 people dead, including gang members, police informants, and even civilians caught in the crossfire. In the end, the Hells Angels won. They wiped out the Rock Machine, took over their drug operations, and became the most dominant biker gang in Canada. How they control Canada. By the 2000s, the Hells Angels were untouchable. They had control over drug trafficking, extortion, illegal gambling, and even some legal businesses like strip clubs and bars. They had connections in law enforcement, politics, and the business world, making them incredibly difficult to stop. And they didn't just control Quebec. The gang expanded across Canada, setting up chapters in British Columbia, Ontario, Alberta, and other provinces. Wherever they went, they brought the same level of violence and intimidation. But their biggest strength? Fear. People knew that messing with the Hells Angels meant serious consequences. If a rival gang tried to take their territory, members would disappear or turn up dead. If someone betrayed, they'd end up buried in the middle of nowhere. Even police officers feared going after them because the Hells Angels didn't hesitate to target law enforcement. The brutal crimes. The Hells Angels have been linked to some of the most horrific crimes in Canadian history. Here are just a few examples. The Lennoxville Massacre, 1985. 5 members of the Hells Angels were brutally executed by their gang in a clubhouse in Lennoxville, Quebec. Their bodies were stuffed into sleeping bags and dumped in a river. The reason? They weren't following orders and were seen as a threat to the gang's leadership. The murder of Mike Duffy, 2002. A drug dealer named Mike Duffy was tortured and killed by the Hells Angels after they suspected him of being a police informant. His body was burned, and his killers were later arrested. But this was just one of many cases where the gang brutally eliminated people who betrayed them. The Surrey 6 Massacre, 2007. While not directly committed by the Hells Angels, this gang-related murder in British Columbia was part of a drug territory war they were heavily involved in. 6 people, including 2 innocent bystanders, were executed in a high-rise apartment. These are just a few cases, but the truth is, the Hells Angels have hundreds of bodies on their hands. Most of their crimes go unsolved because people are too afraid to talk. Even those who do cooperate with the police often end up dead before they can testify. International connections. The Hells Angels' influence extends beyond Canada, with notable international connections. In January 2025, the founder of the Romanian chapter was sentenced to 25 years in U.S. federal prison for racketeering and drug trafficking, highlighting the club's global reach. Additionally, in September 2024, reports emerged that Iran had recruited criminal gangs, including the Hells Angels, to carry out assassination attempts and kidnappings against critics and dissidents in Europe and the U.S. These incidents underscore the Hells Angels' extensive and complex international network, involving them in various criminal activities worldwide. The crackdown. Despite their power, the Hells Angels haven't had it easy. Over the years, the police have launched massive operations to take them down. Some of the biggest crackdowns include Operation Springtime, 2001, a huge police operation in Quebec that arrested over 100 Hells Angels members and associates. Many of them were charged with murder, drug trafficking, and organized crime activities. Project Tandem, 2006, a raid in Ontario that led to the arrests of multiple Hells Angels members, including top leaders. Police said the operation was aimed at the criminal activities of the Hells Angels motorcycle gang, the Direct Attack. Dateral Subteral Don Bell of Ontario Provincial Police said 15 Hells Angels members, one member of the Vagabond motorcycle gang, and 11 other people were arrested. Led by the Biker Enforcement Unit, the investigation resulted in the seizure of $1 million in cash, jewelry, cars, and motorcycles, along with several weapons, including a machine gun. Police also seized drugs with a street value of $3 million, including cocaine, crystal meth, ecstasy, and marijuana, Bell said. Project Shark TC, 2009, a watershed moment in the battle against organized crime in Quebec. In a remarkable show of force, over 150 Hells Angels members were arrested in a single operation. This massive crackdown demonstrated not only the determination of law enforcement to combat the Hells Angels, but also their ability to coordinate efforts across regions to target the club's extensive network. The massive scale of the arrests sent shockwaves through the criminal underworld and illustrated the significant resources being allocated to fight organized crime. But here's the thing, Hells Angels always bounce back. No matter how many arrests happen, there's always someone ready to take over. The gang is so deeply rooted in the criminal underworld that wiping them out completely seems almost impossible. The present day. So where are the Hells Angels now? Well, they're still very much active in Canada. They've learned to operate more carefully, keeping a lower profile while still running their illegal businesses. They continue to be involved in drug trafficking, extortion, and even international crime networks. Some of their leaders are behind bars, but the gang itself, still going strong. And they're not the only ones. In recent years, rival biker gangs like the Outlaws, MC, and Bandidos have tried to challenge their power. But the Hells Angels have one advantage that keeps them on top of fear and loyalty. The Hells Angels aren't just a motorcycle club. They're a criminal empire that has ruled Canada's streets for decades. They've survived wars, police crackdowns, and even betrayals within their ranks. So, next time you see a group of bikers riding down the highway, just remember that they aren't just there for the ride. Some of them belong to one of the most brutal gangs Canada has ever seen. And that's a terrifying thought. If you found this video interesting, make sure to like, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what other gang stories you'd like us to cover. Until next time, stay safe out there.